first, I'm going to give you a quick idea about how this session will go. I am doing a recording of this. I will be sharing a version of that with my whole course cohort, with all the alumni of both my strategic content and messaging and personal branding blueprint course members. I will also be sharing a public version of this, which will have the actual parts of the session where we discuss our own priorities, and you, hopefully, if you want to go on camera and share feedback, this will be cut out. So the public version will only contain me going through the process and explaining what it is that you should be doing in each step. So, here's the topic for today and what we will be talking about and what we will be doing. The main reason for this to even be here live in front of you is that I was going through a process recently with a couple of different clients of mine in completely different industries, with a completely different planning cadence and content publishing cadence, and like just broadly speaking, marketing cadence. And what I saw was that although they were in very different industries, although their approach to planning was completely different, with each of them, we arrived at a point where what we had initially set as a plan for the year of 2025 wasn't like really working anymore, or we weren't necessarily sure that this is the best thing that we should be spending time on. And especially when it comes to smaller teams, it's always the pressure that you have the opportunity cost. You can only do a couple of things within a given quarter, and you always need to be super mindful about what you're working on. And we had initially thought that we had a clear idea of what we will be doing and so on, but we ended up sort of scrapping a big part of our initial plan and moving to a different setup. And I sort of took a step back and thought about like, why is this happening? What's going on here? And why is this not working? If it was one client, it would have been like, oh, maybe we didn't like spend enough time planning initially. We didn't, add everything that we needed to add to the list. But since it was a few different clients, I was like, oh, like there's a broader thing happening here. There's something in the fabric of reality that's changing that we need to take into account. And what I think this is the fact that just over the past couple of years, things have changed a lot. And I mean like a lot. It's just every year there's something different happening. There's something new coming up that's completely requiring us to rearrange what we're trying to do. And if it was at a certain point, it was COVID, then it was economic uncertainty, then now it's the uncertainty that comes with AI. It isn't really just a blip on the radar that will self-correct in, while it's been happening so consistently over the last few years that it is now like the default state. Like there's just a lot going on all the time, and people's focus is changing, people's priorities are changing, and our planning needs to reflect that. So thinking about that, I was like, okay, like if this is the case, then what do we do? And I thought that like July is a great time to start a sort of a new marketing cycle. And this is for a few different reasons. The main two of which I think are the fact that basically like just how the year works, July is right in the middle, so that's a good time. But more importantly, when you think about your annual planning cycle, it's usually very rushed. And on January 1st, you need to start producing on that plan and you need to start doing new stuff. by mid-January or by the end of January, your boss comes in the room and asks where are the results and what's going on, right? So we need to start in full throttle. And when it comes to the period that's July and August, if you think about them, they're the best way to start a new cycle of marketing initiatives because you have some leeway. It feels less rushed. There's more calm in the summer months, or somewhere at least in the northern hemisphere, where we don't feel so rushed to bring in results. On the contrary, like if you start something now, people are probably gonna leave you to it up until like early September, when back to school campaigns happen, when people are back in the office, when like the new season almost begins. So you have these 2 months of July and August to actually get your bearings, set things up, and actually deliver on stuff. So that's why I think like July is a great time for this new marketing cycle that we're trying to do. Hopefully I've sort of convinced you that this is a good idea, and since you're here in the room with me, I assume you know that this is something that is interesting and you want to do. So let's look at what we are going to do in the next like 45 minutes or so. First, we have 4 steps in this mid-year marketing reset that I'm using. So for each of these 4 steps, I'll give you a short introduction on why this is part of the process and what you need to think about during that particular phase. I'll show you some key questions to direct your thinking within that specific phase. Then we're gonna take a little bit of time. This isn't gonna be like, a full-fledged session when by the end you're like, done. I have everything set up. I can just go and start executing. This is designed to give you a taste of things and get your brain started so that later on today or tomorrow, when you have more time, you can look at that half-finished list with ideas for each individual step, and you can expand on it and actually build your whole action plan for the rest of the year. So we'll take about 3 to 5 minutes for each of our 4 steps to think through the questions that I'll show you, and for all of us together, because I'll be doing the same process as you guys, we'll come back and we'll share a little bit. I'll ask if you have any questions about any of this, if it seems unclear, if you're not 100% sure how to present it to your team or how to sell it to a client or to your manager as something we're doing. We can discuss that too. And then we'll sort of have a clear basis of how that action plan is going to come together. And I mentioned that we will have about 3 to 5 minutes for thinking time for each of these 4 big steps. And you will be thinking that this is just like a very insufficient amount of time. But the reason that I decided to keep it like that, rather than do a 90-minute workshop or anything like that, is because I think that speed is a great filter. The first things that come to mind in brainwriting session like that are usually the biggest pain points, and the things that you feel with your gut are the things that you need to pay attention to. So even if you are watching a recording of this, or if you are going through the process on your own later, my strong suggestion would be to set up a timer for each step and not give it more thought than that. So let's get down to the meat and potatoes. The first step is auditing what you're already doing. The whole reason for going through this process is that there's something that isn't working, or you fear that the plan you have set up won't be working for you much longer. So we need to first answer like what's wrong with it, right? We need to think through everything that we've laid on the table as key marketing campaigns or topics in our content plan that we wanted to focus on, and we need to say, is this a keeper Is this an ongoing initiative that you want to keep up with? Or is this something that we can basically scrap because we're not sure that it's going to work? So for this stage, you should be looking at the main things that you're already doing in your marketing. And this applies both for if you're a marketer or working within the company and you're trying to figure out how to change your marketing plan, or if you're an individual content creator and you're creating content for yourself, for your own brand, and you need to figure out what works. The questions that you might want to ask at this stage include stuff like that. How has the landscape changed since the beginning of the year where we set up our plan? What are the main differences that have come up in the broader environment that would require us to change our approach? An example of that might be the rise of AI content. An example of that might be there are new regulations in our industry that we need to take account of. Or an example of that might be our audience has changed. Like we have shifted our focus to a different subsegment, to a different target audience that we want to attract now. Then comes the question like, what campaigns are currently running on autopilot? You're just doing stuff because you said that you will do it without really seeing any results worth discussing. And then on the other hand side, where is the best ROI coming from? Like what are campaigns that are bringing in outsized results, content formats that are really resonating with your audience, or topics that they're really excited about? And maybe you want to think of it in a sort of a different direction. Like if you were launching today without a plan, like what would you put on that plan? Just try to disassociate from what you already have on the table and try to think from first principles what would make sense to do now. And what are like messaging themes or content topics? What are the things that we're maybe talking about, either about our product or problems that our audience no longer has, things that sound too stale, that are not really hitting the mark anymore? Like anything like that, whatever it is, make sure you think about it. I saw there's a question coming up, so I want to make sure that I answer that before I move on. So let me just check that up real quick. That's a great one. So Innocent asks, how can I use AI to make the auditing process better, faster, and effective? The main way I would go about it is to talk through. I'm now very big on talking to ChatGPT, and I would ask it to assume the role of a very focused contrarian thinker. And I'm gonna give it that role, and I'm gonna ask it like, I'll answer all of these questions essentially in audio form. I'll tell you what it is that's wrong with our current plan. I want you to help me dive deeper and ask provocative, thought-provoking questions that are gonna help me get to the bottom of what's not working with my brand. So something along these lines. Like I can, and thanks for that, by the way. Like I'm going to create a short prompt and I'm gonna add it to the recording, so all of you guys will get a recording and some additional materials. So I'll make sure to include an example prompt like that, so you can use that for all of the different steps in this process. This is actually like a great idea. I don't know how I didn't like think about it first. We're gonna spend exactly 3 minutes to think through these different questions and just free write, if you will. Just start listing out bullet points for any one of the questions that come up here that strike your fancy, and try to come up with something that you see like, oh, this is a big problem that we need to address. So think through this and let's see what comes up. So let's go to the next one, because I think that this is a really big one, and I want to make sure that we think through it. We've seen through the audit what the issues are and what are things that are maybe underperforming. And this is a great outcome if you've done this audit. Like the main goal of the audit is to figure out what to cut. But now the time comes to figure out what to focus attention on. And this is where that second step comes in. The more priorities you have on the list, the less something is truly a priority. So you need to figure out what are the few key initiatives that you need to work on to make sure that you're setting your plan up for success for the rest of the year. So I have written down here on the screen, like, pick one or two big bets for the next 6 months. This would obviously depend on how big your team is. With some of my clients who have bigger marketing teams where they have like 10 people working on producing content for different platforms and different channels, we would have more. But if you're a small team, if you're a team of one, if you're creating content for yourself, or you're the sole content creator for a company, then one or two may sound limiting, but is really the gold standard of where you want to be at. If everything goes swimmingly and by the end of September you've already achieved everything you had on your plate for these big bets, then kudos to you and you're allowed to bring in another one. But start small and then build on top of that, because otherwise it can get very overwhelming. Here are some directional questions that can help. What are the initiatives that you're already seeing are moving the needle the most? Or maybe what initiatives do you have in your plan that you think will still work in this new environment that is the second half of 2025? Is there something that you're already seeing good results from and you want to double down on that? This is a great way to pinpoint a big bet for you. You don't necessarily need to start something new to make the rest of the year successful. Maybe it's about doubling down on what's already working. You may want to think about operations as well. So maybe one of those big initiatives could be streamlining your processes to make your work more effective. For example, one of the clients I'm working with, we're currently in the process of setting up more AI-enabled workflows for their team to use that are hopefully going to save them a lot of time in content production. And this is one of our big bets for the rest of the year. And a really strong question is, what should go on the not now list? And I'm calling it a not now list for a very specific reason, because it sounds way better in your head than saying, this is something I'm never gonna do. You may feel a bit guilty about completely killing an initiative, but if you say, oh, that's a good idea, but now is not the time for it, you're still leaving space to reevaluate it at a later point, and maybe it will be easier for you to put it aside so you can focus on other stuff. And another way of looking about it is, what would you regret not doing by the end of the year? Like, if there's one thing that, I was about to say December 31st, but I hope for everyone's sake that you won't be working on December 31st, but your last work day of the year, you're sitting there, you're looking at the plan and you're being, yeah, it all went great, but I'm really sad that we didn't get to do this one thing. Maybe that's your big bet. So this is a set of directional questions. I hope they give you an idea about like the frame of mind you need to be in to really, figure out what are the key focus points for you. I'm going to put in our timer. We're going to spend 3 minutes thinking through this. And I hope you come up with one or two big bets that you're going to work on. So this next one, step 3, is about going back to your planning and really figuring out, how you're gonna realign what you already cut in step 1 and what you introduced in step 2 with everything else that's happening, because these are just the highlights. You want to make sure that everything else is still consistent with those big bets, but also with the broader environment and the target audience that you're trying to serve. I'm specifically want to introduce the idea of like thinking about this through the perspective of your target audience, because it's not just about how your business has changed or how your initiatives have changed. It's also about how the people you want to serve have changed and what's top of mind for them now that maybe wasn't top of mind at the beginning of the year. Like with the onset of AI, actually, I've heard more people being interested in environmental issues. And I've personally been asked a few times by people in my audience about like what's my stance on the environmental impact of AI. So maybe that's a question you need to answer for your audience, or maybe it's something completely different. All of this to say that the environment is changing and people priorities are changing, and this is the reason why we started that whole resetting journey in the middle of the year anyway, and you need to make sure that your plan addresses that. And so here are a few realignment questions you may want to ask yourself. What's my audience thinking about now? Is there something that's changed that's top of mind for them now? What are maybe some industry shifts that I have been missing or I'm not talking about as much as needed? Is there something about my messaging that's not up to date with what my audience is interested in and how the industry has shifted? Maybe you've been talking about and you've been putting forward features of your platform that are now not so innovative and they're just like the standard now. So maybe you don't want to talk about these components so much and you want to talk about different capabilities that actually differentiate you from others. How have the priorities of your audience shifted since January? That's also related to the topics of your content, and also how your product does the job for them and addresses these priorities in the best way possible. Or maybe what are the pain points that are most urgent today? These are all example questions, and you see here that I'm broadly focusing on what you're talking about, so your content topics, but also on the way that your brand is positioned. These are probably the two biggest areas that you'd want to focus on. So let's spend a few minutes to think about this now. I want to spend some time talking about the final step, and this is a step that is highly dependent on your company setup and how you're working with your team to work on different marketing initiatives, whether you're a freelancer or a consultant or an agency that's doing work for clients, or if you're set internally within a team. You will always need to look at that new plan that you have created and really figure out what it means for your day-to-day operations. First big question is, how do you introduce this plan to the team and make sure you get buy-in from them? And the second question is, once you have that buy-in, how do you make sure that you're staying on track and you're not getting immediately distracted with new things that come up as you go along? So here are a few questions that will help you navigate that ongoing process in a more structured way. First thing is definitely think about how you will communicate this pivot in priorities to your team, to your managers, or to your clients, depending on what's your role. One big thing is that I usually make sure that this doesn't feel like, oh, we're changing things midway through and doesn't create additional overwhelm. It's more of a question of, we are doing well, but we need to course correct to make sure we hit the mark for the rest of the year. And this is just part of that process. It's completely natural. And it's something that actually will work in our favor in the long run, rather than, just sticking to something that's predefined and predetermined. So sharing this as good news is super important. You definitely need to say out loud with everyone in the room what are the initiatives that will be killed or will be postponed because you're bringing in new big bets to work on. And then you also want to make sure that you have a way to keep everyone accountable to what you have agreed. I've even done super simple stuff like asking every person on the team to verbally confirm that they agree that this is what we need to be doing. And for sure, keeping this front and center and having it in a slide deck or in your project management tool or whatever you're using to keep track of initiatives, make sure that you have a visible space where you can look at these priorities. The resources that will need to be reallocated, that's a separate conversation. Someone was working on one of the initiatives you killed. They are now on the team of these new initiatives. Make sure they know about it first off, and then they feel comfortable taking the baton and doing something different. So even that internal discussion and internal alignment with team members will be super important. And if now you have different initiatives, you need to probably update the metrics that you track to reflect the change. I'm not going to give you 3 minutes for that because it's a broader discussion and it's best done within your team. Take these questions as sort of like a discussion list for your next team meeting when you present all of these new ideas or when you go into the deep dive discussion of actually executing against that new plan for the rest of the year. And try to make sure that you have clear answers on all of them, because even the best laid plan won't work unless you have everyone on board there. And I feel that if you pause for a second, if you look objectively at what you're doing and reset, you will be able to go full speed ahead and take a lap in front of all of your competitors. This is sort of the whole reasoning behind doing this. It's not a step back. It's not completely hitting on the brakes. It's a way to reorient yourself and then go full steam ahead. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'm planning on doing a lot more live sessions in the next couple of months. The next one is coming up on July 29th. I'm going to share it in the chat in a second. And it will be a follow-up of a session I did at the start of the year called Prompt to Perfect. We'll be talking specifically about building full-scale AI workflows that work for your whole team and actually distributing the knowledge of using AI in the best way possible within your team. Join it. I hope to see you there. And with that, thanks so much. And until our next live session, I hope you have a lovely, super exciting, and very energy filled time this July.